much for coming today. I don't know, Susan, do we have some kind of a trophy or a certificate or something to give to Mr. Booker? I think this might be the biggest crowd. And of course, I want to welcome all of our UMW brothers who are with us today too. We're always glad to have you with us. And I want to say a special welcome to Brent McDougall, who is the senior minister at First Baptist just down the street. And apparently you saw all of our advertising and you could not stay away.
Could not stay away.
And we love having you, and we're thankful that you're here with us today. Just a couple of announcements. On May 22nd, we will be celebrating United Methodist Women in our church services, both online and in person. And so I hope you will tune in, or you will come and watch our United Methodist Women serve in the
Food is right.
It's always fun to do that, you know. We've done it for a long time. Of course, some of you may not know that United Methodist Women has now had a name change. And that's not anything new either, because it's changed many times since the late 1800s. But officially, we are now United Women in Faith. So you will be hearing those words sometimes, but we are still United Methodist Women here at Church Street. We'll get there eventually. That's part of it. In fact, when I said that, I had to help my little brain say it right now, say it right. We will break for summer, so this will be our last general meeting until September. So it's a little bit, I'm a former school teacher, so it's, I told my circle members a while ago, I still get that feeling in May when you're trying to get 10,000 things done by the end of the school year, so things are a little bit shaky. But that's okay. So, Pat Bellengrath has a devotion for us as we begin today.
Good morning. Good morning. See, our mission focus today from our prayer guide is a good one. Yeah, for Tuesday, May the 10th, this is how some of our pledge dollars are used. Tara Sandra Shinamir received a scholarship to pursue a Bachelor of Business Studies in Management at Africa University in Zimbabwe. So it just shows you our reach is certainly global, and our money does amazing things. And I wanted to share this devotion with you. On this beautiful spring day, we give thanks for God's creation and for the joy and happiness and peace that this wondrous earth gives us in all its glory. We also come to this day with heavy hearts as we witness so much brokenness in our church and in our world. So how should we, as United Women in Faith, respond to all, that's a challenge right there, respond to all the challenges, the turmoil, and the suffering? We, as United Women in Faith, know that now more than ever, our mission work becomes even more vital and more urgent. In this complicated and messy world of ours, we know we must be passionate about sharing the good news of God's liberating love in Jesus Christ. So how do we respond in the midst of so much brokenness? First, we must be sure that we are right with God. We really cannot love God unless we love one another. And to love one another, we must know one another. So our being a community becomes so very important. We understand this to mean that we love, accept, and support each other. Despite our differences, despite our faults, despite our disagreements, we can care deeply for ourselves and for others. We respond by being filled with hope, by loving one another. Having been offered grace, each and every one of us, we remain faithful, ready to understand and to receive. We will be witnesses to the story of Christ and to the ongoing realities of our world. Realities for which we must repent. The places of suffering and struggle, these realities which our God, who is alive in each one of us, calls us to face with love and courage and compassion. Who we are and what we do matter to so many. So let's be an example for others so that the world knows of our love and compassion. We believe that love and action can change the world. Yes, we do. Our place is anywhere and everywhere where God calls us. I want to end this devotion. I found this the other day. I think I found it on Facebook. It's written by a Ukrainian artist who died on April 22nd in Bucha, Ukraine. She was 84, and her name is, I'm going to butcher it, it's Lubov Vachenko. And she wrote this. Here's to the bridge builders, the hand holders, the light bringers, the extraordinary souls wrapped in ordinary lives who quietly weave threads of humanity into an inhumane world. They are the unsung heroes in a world at war with itself. They are the whisperers of hope that peace is possible. Look for them in this present darkness. Light your candle with their flame, and then go. Build bridges, hold hands, bring light to a dark and desperate world. Be the hero you are looking for. Peace is possible. It begins with us. That's my prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you, Pat. You always come to us with such inspiring words, and we appreciate it. So, it is my honor to be able to introduce to you Bob Booker. It was also, this friend of mine said, Susan, being able to get Bob Booker as your speaker is a real coup. I can't take credit for all of that, but I might. Many of you know who Bob Booker is. Many of you have worked with him. Some of you have known him for years. I personally have known of him, but he's never actually met me until today. I did finally get him on the phone, so I had some assurance he was going to be here. Bob grew up in and you can explain better than me, the area considered the bottom of East Knoxville. He has done many things. He has been a city councilman, a state legislator, author, historian. He is, at this point, he's been a notable Knoxvillian for a number of years. Civic leader, you name it, he's done it all, and he's written it all down. It was interesting for me to go on the internet and look at everything that you can possibly find about him. He's truly a gift to the city of Knoxville. Bob, thank you.
Thank you, Susan, and ladies and gentlemen, I'm just honored to be here. It's been a long time since I was here before. I think I was here May the 9th, 2006, when a group invited me to come and talk, so I guess I was so impressive. Again. I've spoken at a lot of churches, and I enjoy coming to different churches. I've even been a member of different churches. I grew up in Tabernacle Baptist Church, and when I turned 14, my mother said, you can choose for yourself now, and since Many of my teachers and many of our fellow students were members at Logan Temple AME Zion. I joined Logan Temple and was there during my high school years. And when I went to the Army, I was a member of the Christian Scientist Church and even became a soloist in that church. And when I came back to Knoxville and started the Knoxville College, I was wanting to affiliate with the Presbyterian Church, but, well, I had some difficulty with them in terms of a particular job, so I joined the Unitarian Church. And when I taught school in Chattanooga, I was a member of that church in Chattanooga and edited the church newsletter. And I guess I've always wondered what the difference was in the different denominations. And I asked an older gentleman one time what he thought the difference was in denominations, and this was his response. He said, well, you know, it's the Baptists who will see a man lying in the gutter and get him out of that gutter and clean him up. Then the Methodists will take that same man and give him an education. Then the Presbyterians will take that man and give him some sophistication and introduce him to society, and then the Baptists will pick him up out of the gutter all over again. I don't know if there's any but it sounds logical to me. Today I've been asked to come and share with you some information on the infamous urban renewal projects in the city of Knoxville, and I'm going to do that kind of in brief form so that I will leave time for you to make comments or ask questions. I've talked on this subject many, many times, and I very seldom use notes when I've talked about urban renewal because I have many of the facts in my head. I know what the problems it caused. It's in my head. But today, I'm going to do things a little different. I'm going to read from some notes so I can actually share some figures with you so you will fully understand the impact of urban renewal. And I'm going to answer this story, and I'm going to go a little further back so you will understand how we got to urban renewal in the first place. The Knoxville Housing Authority, which was responsible for urban renewal, was established May 9, 1936. It commissioned a study of 32,862 dwellings in the city of Knoxville and found that 24,691 of them were heated by open grates or coal stoves. 20% had no running water. 30% were without electricity or gas lights. 79% had coal stoves for heating. 40% were without bathtubs or showers. 86% of these dwellings were occupied by whites. 14% occupied by blacks. To help remedy the situation, in 1940, the Knoxville Housing Authority built college homes for blacks with 320 units, Austin homes for blacks with 200 units, and Western Heights for whites with 244 units, which seems very, very small to me. That was a total of 764 units for people living in 24,691 substandard dwellings. At the time, I was only 5 years old when this was going on. And I lived in one of those substandard dwellings. My house did not have electricity. For the first 14 years of my life, we used kerosene lamps until we moved out of that house somewhere else. We always make the joke about taking a bath on Saturday. Well, it was no joke for me because that's what we did. And I see some heads nodding, which means that you understand what I'm talking about. We had to heat water on a cold stove and pour it in that tin tub and get in there and take a bath. Now, my brothers never figured this out. I had two brothers, and we had to take that bath on Saturday night. And I would protest mightily that I didn't want to take a bath. Oh, I was raised Cain. But I was raising Cain so I could say, well, I'll be the first one in. Because I did not like taking a bath after my other two brothers had water. So we got a little bit. Many of the houses in my neighborhood were substandard. They didn't have electricity. Many of them, my own house had a toilet on the back porch. The pipes were hooked up, so we didn't have an outhouse. But many houses in my neighborhood had the outhouse where you had to walk out in the rain and snow or whatever to do your business. First Creek wreaked havoc in my neighborhood. First Creek ran the entire length of my neighborhood, from Jackson Avenue, where it becomes McCullough, all the way through across Willow Street and Central. First Creek ran parallel with Willow, ran under Central at Willow, looped around under the businesses on the west side of Central and looped back under Central, under the gym theater. So it was called Cripple Creek for that reason, because it was so crooked and it created so much damage. So, in 1958, when we heard about well, in the old days, when the Housing Authority did that project in 1936, it was slum clearance. They hadn't invented the term urban renewal yet. So in 1958, they came with this new term, urban renewal. And I said, yay, this is a great idea. We need to control that creek. We need to clean out these old houses in my neighborhood that are dilapidated, and people need to move in modern facilities. I wish I could have lived in Austin Homes. They lived in the lap of luxury. I wish I could have lived in College Homes and Western Heights. But no, I couldn't live where they had electricity. I had to deal with the kerosene lamps. But what happened when urban renewal came, it not only took out those dilapidated properties, it not only controlled First Creek, but it went too far. People in charge of urban renewal, people in the housing authority, people on city council, real estate developers said, this is our opportunity to get some federal funds, and we're just going to go all the way with it. So they not only cleared out my old neighborhood down in the bottom, they decided that they would go on Vine Street, where the heart of the black business community was, and clear out all of that. And there is another urban renewal project that never gets any mention, and I'm going to just mention it today. It was called the Yale Avenue Project. All the black projects were called Willow Street Project, Morningside Project, and Morningside Project and Mountain View Project. But the Yale Avenue Project got basically the white community, where it was Yale Avenue in the heart of the University of Tennessee. The University of Tennessee wanted to expand, but they didn't want to create any ill will. You know, big orange people like to be nice to everybody. But they got the housing authority as the whipping boy. And so urban renewal was operated by the housing authority and doubled the size of the University of Tennessee. So that will give you some clue as to how big the Yale Avenue project was. In fact, I have the figures somewhere around here, but I don't have them in front of me, I don't think. But that was a project that we don't know about. So, urban renewal destroyed the black business community that had established a stronghold by 1883. That year, the Jernigan and Son Mortuary was established, and today it is Knoxville's oldest black business. The city directory of 1884 lists 14 barbers. 10 of those barbers were black. Melvin J.R. Gentle, another black, had established his shoemaking shop on Central Street in 1858. In 1870, Harriet McClung Johnson, the mother of Cal Johnson, the former slave, and an oldest son operated a hotel, restaurant, and grocery store on Willis Street. So by 1958, when urban renewal began, black businesses had been in that area for at least 100 years. So after 100 years of operating successful businesses, urban renewal came along and destroyed every one of those businesses, except for Jernigan and Son. Jernigan and Son relocated and is still operating. But businesses like the Dogan Gate, the motel, Knoxville's first black motel, moved to Jessamine Street. And within 10 years it was gone because it just wasn't in the proper location to operate. What happened with those businesses for the most part? They were a part of what I call the triple whammy. First of all, urban renewal took the house a person lived in, took the business that he operated, and then took the church that he worshiped in. So here he was trying to reestablish himself in another house, trying to reorganize his business, trying to find a place of worship, and it just couldn't be done with the amount of money. He was given fair market value for his property rather than replacement value. See, when you lived in an urban renewal area where property values had been depressed, your house was worth $10,000. But in order to find a comparable house, you had to pay $20,000. So where was that money coming from? You had operated a business for 10 or 12 or 15 years. Where were you going to relocate that business? Where was a proper site that would work for you? Where would you get the money to do it? And then thirdly, as I said, you had a church that had been destroyed. So how were you going to rebuild your church? So that was a problem with the triple whammy. The 3 urban renewal projects that I'm talking about between 1958 and 1974 destroyed 3,200 structures. They destroyed 107 black businesses. Now, what were those black businesses? Certainly they weren't manufacturing plants, they weren't automobile makers and all of that. But they were businesses that provided an income for a family and for that family's employees. And here's what is a sample of what they took. 21 cafes and grills, okay? 9 billiard parlors, 4 beer taverns, 16 beauty shops, 8 barber shops, 3 shoe repair shops, 9 grocers, 6 confectioners, 3 shoe shine parlors, 9 taxi cab companies, and 5 dry cleaners. So that's what urban renewal took from the black community. And perhaps the biggest tragedy of all were the churches that really didn't need to be bothered. But urban renewal took 14 of those black churches. And listen to this. One of them had been established in 1860, Mount Zion Baptist Church. That was in very good shape. Mount Olive Baptist Church, an 1869 church. Shiloh Presbyterian, an 1865 church, and one that really was the most outstanding black church in the city. It was the most storied black church in the city. Anytime from 1865, when it was established, you could pick up a newspaper and find something going on at Logan Temple, whether it was black men organizing to run for office or protesting one thing or another, or a famous funeral. And I just like to read an excerpt from an article from the Knoxville Journal in June 22nd, 1886, with regards to Logan Temple AME Zion Church. The fine church is finished. The new colored Logan Temple dedicated Sunday. A large crowd in attendance. The building is a handsome structure located on Reservoir just below State Street. The finish is first class in every respect and is neatly furnished inside. The seats have the right pitch toward the pulpit and afford seating capacity for nearly 1,000 people. 2 stained glass windows in the rear of the pulpit, near the bear the inscriptions, Irving Commemorative Window, and so forth. This is one of the finest churches in the South and the 3rd largest in the country belonging to the colored people. Yet the people in charge of urban renewal saw no worth in that church. Our historical societies, our people who run around protecting our old buildings, saw no need to protect that building or to stand up to offer any words of support. Not only did that happen with this church, but the Green Medical Arts Building, where Dr. Henry Morgan Green built his clinic in 1922, because black physicians could not practice their profession at Knoxville General Hospital. General Hospital was built in 1902 and accommodated black people in a couple of basement wards. In 1933, it added the Negro wing to that hospital, which cost more than the total hospital cost when they built it, that accommodated black patients. Yet black physicians still were not allowed to practice at Knoxville General in 1933. So Dr. Green in 1922, along with Dr. Preston and 2 other doctors, built their own clinics because those were the only places black physicians could practice their profession. But urban renewal didn't recognize this historic building and tore it down. It's interesting to me, and I just really thought about this recently, the only building they left standing in the urban renewal area was the gym theater. And it never dawned on me, why did they let the gym theater stand? Well, those in charge didn't want black people coming to the Tennessee or the Renewal. So they left the gym standing so that black people who went to movies would stay at the gym. But what they didn't realize was that students at Knoxville College and others were protesting and demanding tickets at the Tennessee and the Riviera. And sure enough, theaters desegregated in 1964, which rendered the gym theater useless that people were trying to protect to keep black people on the reservation. So the gym theater went out of business as a movie house and became a nightclub and was there until the James White Parkway took it, and then that was it, into the gym theater. As Paul Harvey would say, page 2. We always talk about what happened to the black community in the urban renewal. Completely destroyed it, and we can go into much detail about that. But what we forgot was that before 1963, there were virtually no black people in East Knoxville. So, when the Housing Authority and Urban Renewal took all the black residences in southeast Knoxville, because Jackson Avenue is the dividing line in our city between north and south, and most black people live on the south part of Jackson Avenue. But when those 3,200 structures were destroyed, where are black people gonna go? Well, East Knoxville, of course. And those real estate people and others started saying, hey, you folks better think about it. Black folks coming, you better find someplace else to go. So urban renewal was not only an upheaval for black people, but for white people as well. So let me give you some facts about that just to prove what I'm saying to you. I said virtually no black people lived in East Knoxville before 1963. And I got a city directory to prove what I'm saying to you. In 1958, no black people lived on the following streets in East Knoxville: Castle, Catawba, East 5th, Fern, Garfield, Iroquois, Ivy, Jefferson, Lansing, Lilac, Mary, Parkview, Washington, or Woodbine. Where both blacks and whites lived in East Knoxville in 1958, this is the breakdown you get. Chestnut Street, 64 whites, 14 blacks. Crestview Street, 20 whites, 2 blacks. Lay Avenue, 47 whites, 3 blacks. Seminole, 26 whites, 3 blacks. By 1962, the 14 blacks on Chestnut had increased to 23. The Crestview black population went from 2 to 22. The 3 blacks on Lay had increased to 33. The 38 blacks on McCullough had increased to 90. Linden blacks had increased from 20 to 50. Wilder Street in 1958 had 12 blacks. In 1962, there were 59. Those numbers of blacks increased every year after. So that is basically the story of urban renewal as I've been able to research it and share with you. And now, if you like, I'd like to open it up to your comments, your questions, however you'd like to do it, because I've tried to do this in a nutshell to give you basically what it was all about so you'd have time to ask questions and make comments. Yes. Yes, you.
Yes, it's tragic, it's heartbreaking, and it's criminal, and sometimes I wonder how you deal with knowing all of this, and I have to compliment you for keeping going, and letting people know. But my question for you is there any, I know it's so different because that was so tragic, but as for now, what is happening with gentrification and the new baseball stadium, how do you feel about that? How does it even fit, or does it even fit into the same kind of change?
With regards to the baseball, I'm very happy about it because it's being constructed on the site that I know very well. My church sat in the middle of that tract of land. My house sat one block from the east end of it. I had my first job in the Shady Corner grocery store that was on that tract of land when I was in the 7th grade. My boyhood friends, one of the friends from my boyhood, his family owned that grocery store, and they gave me a job when I was in the 7th grade, stocking shelves and picking up stuff at wholesale houses. So to have that baseball stadium come on that particular site, that has been vacant for the most part for the past 60 years. The Lake Packing Company was really the only viable entity on that site, and when it went out of business, that was the end of it. So baseball stadium to that site where the first creek ran through there all the time and flooded things out, but it's now underground, so it can't flood anything anymore. I think it's great for that part of the city to see that kind of life, so I'm wholeheartedly in favor of the baseball park. And as to your first comment, it hurts a lot to think about the businesses that we lost, to think about how they could have grown, to think about all the income that the owners and their heirs could have reaped from those businesses that were just thrown away because nobody thought that they were important. It really hurts. Gwen McKenzie, as vice mayor, has passed this resolution with city council to come up with a lot of money to help restore the black business community. I don't know if that's gonna help or not, but at least somebody's thinking about it. And those that nobody on city council thought about that in 1958 until 1974. At least somebody on city council today is trying to make, I hate to use the word reparations, I don't like that word at all, but trying to make amends for what happened way back then. Yes.
Okay, so urban renewal was actually a federal term that they came up with through the federal government, correct? Okay, it sounds so positive. The name of it sounds very positive, but yet it is so egregious, and to me is a total sign of systemic racism. To me, it can't be any clearer that happened. Was that intentional from the get-go, or was that just something that came of it?
Well, it's hard to read people's minds, but that's what it points to. Whether in any of these cities where it has taken place, that seems to be the case. Whether it's with so-called slum clearance or highway development or street widening or whatever. The only city I can think of where it was where the white community was involved was in Chattanooga. But any other project I've looked at, it had to do with the devastation of the black community, especially the black business community. So we just have to deduce by looking at what the facts are. We can't put in writing, it was just a racist thing. My friend Avon Rollins, who was director of the Beck Center, often said it was Negro removal. Of course, that term has been lost since he's been gone, but that's what he termed it, Negro removal.
Okay.
Yeah.
They've tried,
I'm sorry.
they've tried the same thing. It's just happened recently in Dallas, where one part of Oak Cliff, which is a suburb of Dallas that the city of Dallas took over,
Yeah.
and it was where I grew up. And the houses, it was more of a Latino Hispanic community. And so they decided they were gonna clean it up. And they've made it a thriving business community again with Latino businesses. The problem is that a lot of the homes have escalated immensely in value. And people are coming in and buying these houses that were built for $20,000 in the 400s and 500s. And that sounds good, except that the people who want to stay there can't afford the taxes on their home. And that's a sad thing for me.
Well, that's the sad thing with us here too. As I mentioned in the beginning, these 3 public housing projects were built in 1940 to accommodate the first slum clearance. And then we wind up building so many other public housing projects. People, I'm sure, would prefer to live in their own private homes, to take care of their flower beds and their gardens, and take pride, even if they don't own the place, they have some kind of pride in keeping up property. But pride is really lost when you're forced in the public housing, where the person next door really doesn't care about how the front yard looks and all of that. So it's a problem. Yes, somebody over here.
how do you feel? I mean, this is gentrification, urban renewal, but it really is pushing the people who live in that area out. I mean, I don't see, personally, I don't see a space for the people that already live there to flourish anymore.
Well, it's interesting, Lonsdale Homes was built in order to accommodate those people who were being uprooted in the east, who had no place to go. And for many years, Lonsdale was one of the stepchildren of Knoxville, along with South Knoxville. And I'm happy to see that some things are taking place there now. The Emerald Youth thing, I guess it's a great asset to the community, because people were complaining our children had no place to go, they had no recreation, and they built this wonderful facility at several $1 million. In fact, I'm having lunch with Steve Diggs next week, the guy who heads up the Emerald Youth thing, and I don't know what he wants to talk to me about. I have always been concerned about Lonsdale. In fact, I talked with Clarence McDowell a couple of weeks ago, because I wrote a column on Lonsdale that I'd really like to know the history of that community. Because for years I've been talking with Lonsdale elders. Can you find some pictures? Can you share some history with me? And we were talking a while ago about Martin Chapel, one of the older churches in the community. And there are a number of older black churches in Lonsdale. I'd really like to know the history of all of them. But it's difficult to get information. I've written the history of Mechanicsville and basically the history of Black Knoxville. But Lonsdale information is hard to come by. I remember when Dr. Graves opened his drugstore in Lonsdale. It was one of the finest things you ever wanted to see, the new Graves drugstore. But there are no pictures of that drugstore. There is talk about the W.W. Williams grocery store in Lonsdale. That was known throughout. There are no pictures of the Williams drugstore that I can find. So it's difficult for me to get into Lonsdale not having history, not knowing a lot about it. But I do see some progress. I know the city had built a park in Lonsdale some time ago. But well, that's all I can say about it. Yes.
What is your opinion about the new affordable housing initiative in the city? Is that a positive? Do you see it as?
I don't know anything about it except that there are not any houses in the city that people can really afford and rent other than public housing. I think we're going the way of Nashville, where people who are on the lower end of the scale having to leave the city because there's no places to rent. I get a call at least a week from somebody wanting to buy my house. And I said, if I were to sell it, where am I going? So I can't answer your question because I don't know. Yeah, we got a lot of these puff pieces in the news about what government is trying to do, thought about doing, and they really don't register with the people who really need the service. So, I guess that's why I can't answer your question. I haven't seen it. Nothing jumps out at me that says help is on the way. So I don't know. I don't see it. Maybe somebody else has a better grasp than I do. I just don't see it. Yes?
I remember I was young in the 60s, early 60s when they were doing this, but on Sunday afternoons after church, we used to deliver food to people that were living in this area, and I remember it was impoverished, yes, but people had homes. I mean, they were homes. And then they started just tearing it all out, and they built the Coliseum and things like that. And I said, Mom and Dad, where are these people going to move? Well, I don't know. They'll have to find somewhere. places for entertainment and such, like the Coliseum and things like that, but why did they have to pick there and move all these people? And my question is, did Knoxville lose some of the black population to other places at that point? Did people move away, or did they all stay here?
Well, that I can't answer because I don't know. There were some people who really fought what was going on, and some fought things that really were not going on, but they thought were going to go on. And one name I'll throw out is Evelyn Hazen. We all know Baker Hazen House, the museum. Well, Evelyn Hazen was still living at the time. And she thought the urban renewal project was going to widen Danbridge Avenue, which is in front of Baker Hazen. And of course, all of her rental property was on the south side of Danbridge, and she didn't want to lose it. So she saw my name in the paper. I had been complaining about urban renewal. I was a member of the legislature at the time. So she called me and said, I want to talk with you. So I went up to Baker Hazen House. She sent me to Washington. She had called Washington and she talked with the Secretary of HUD's wife. I think his name was Schultz at the time. And she paid my way to Washington to talk to people at HUD because she didn't want Danbridge Avenue widened to destroy her property. So I went to Washington and I talked with the people at HUD. They said, well, look, we got nothing to do with this. We furnish the money, but it's your city council that calls the shots. If you need to go back and talk with them. So I came back and reported to Ms. Hazen, and HUD said, you know what I just said. They furnished the money, but they have nothing to do with the project. So that was into that, but they never widened Danbridge Avenue. They never bothered her property, so she lived her life out, not worrying about that anymore. But there were other people who registered protests, but they were ignored. We went to various meetings. In fact, it was so long ago, I've forgotten about most of that stuff. But when I go through my scrapbooks, I see articles where I made one statement or another. I called people names and whatever. And I said, did I really say that? I was one of the ones who was protesting urban renewal because I went to work in urban renewal really not knowing what it was all about. In 1964, I stopped at the airport to hear some politician speak, and Mayor John Duncan was there. Of course, he and I had been adversaries when I was a college student, because I was leading the sit-in movement, and he wasn't too keen on that. He didn't protest, but I thought he was my enemy. But when I saw him at the airport, he said, what are you doing? You still teaching in Chattanooga? I said, no, I went to the aluminum company looking for a job. He said, well, the plant manager's a good friend of mine. I'll put in a good word for you. I said, well, I appreciate that. He said, well, hey, I got something at City Hall you might be interested in. I said, great. He didn't have anything at City Hall for me, but he hired me and assigned me to the Housing Authority. So I actually worked in the field office where urban renewal was taking place. So I had a chance to see and witness a number of things that I wouldn't have seen otherwise. And I worked in that office until Mayor Leonard Rogers became mayor. And he said, look, I don't like having people on the city payroll working for somebody else, so you get yourself down to City Hall. So I became a weedy lot inspector. I helped get rid of junk cars and all that kind of stuff. But anyhow, that was my experience actually working in urban renewal in the field office in 1964 to 65. I worked in urban renewal and saw some up close things that I really didn't like. Wheeling and dealing that was going on. For example, there was one employee who was, I guess, a middle line employee. He would go to houses and see beautiful toilets that he liked. Or he had stored in our basement a pink toilet, a green toilet, a blue toilet. What he was gonna do with all that stuff, I don't know, but that was his thing to collect toilets.
Okay.
We didn't come to talk about toilets, so. Yes,
So the houses, you said people who were forced to move were given some money for the fair market rental for their house. So what was done for the businesses? So if I owned a barber shop, what was done for me?
well, the very same thing, fair market value plus moving expenses. But that didn't mean a thing. If you were well established in a particular area, you had to find another spot for your business that was zoned properly. But none of that worked because, as I saw it, these businesses were a part of a cluster effect. See, there was a gym theater there on the corner, and when you went to the gym to see a movie, you dropped off a pair of shoes at the shoe shop, you dropped off your dry cleaner, you stopped at a restaurant on the way back and had dinner, you picked up your prescription at the drugstore, all within walking distance. We're talking 2 or 3 blocks of black businesses. Once that cluster effect was destroyed, that was it. Now, I just mentioned a while ago what the city council resolution with all the proposed money to reestablish the black business community. I could see something like that in Burlington. I think the spaces in Burlington to do that same kind of thing. You have Magnolia on one side, you have Martin Luther King that runs through, you have a lot of vacant property, you have underused property. There are magnificent buildings there that could be used, renovated for business purposes. That may work. Otherwise, I don't know how you do it. The only black businesses left after urban renewal, there were 1 or 2 in Mechanicsville. They're at the corner of College and University, like the barber shops and a couple of restaurant cafes, and 1 or 2 in Lonsdale. But other than that, the black business community was completely destroyed, completely destroyed.
There needs to be retribution.
Yes.
One problem pertaining to Lonsdale, we're landlocked. We had a organization to come in, and they traveled all over the United States. And they had never seen a community that had 4 or 5 interstates surrounding the community. Lonsdale has 4 interstates surrounding us, so we're landlocked. And the initiative that went out from the previous mayor and the urban renewal was they were going to put over 100 houses, new homes in the Lonsdale community. And they've done that. But because of the rental prices, you cannot afford $1,000 to $1,200 for a 2 or 3 bedroom house. So what we found out is that companies, not a private entity, are coming in, buying up vacant lots and building these homes. There are no businesses as far as a grocery store. When I moved to that community, there was a TV repair shop, a shoe shop, restaurant, Graves drugstore, 2 grocery stores. Today, the only thing that's left is Emerald Facility. And we're getting ready to fight with whomever powers that be, because they're wanting to take Sammy Hill School and destroy destroy or take away half of it, because we were promised a park. Now they're wanting to put a medical center there where Sammy Hill School is located. But with the new school, they will not need all of Sammy Hill. But they're wanting to put a medical clinic there instead of giving the community the park that was promised. When Florida Steel closed off part of Lonsdale, there was promise made of sidewalks and different things for the community. They've yet to materialize. So my thing is, we need to hold their foot to the ground and not budge until they come and put what was agreed upon. So we're getting ready to start meeting with the powers that be downtown. And we'll see where it goes.
Yeah.
But one historian that we need to get the information for you is Miss Lois LaFleur.
I've talked to her, she and I are good friends. I've talked to her until I'm blue in the face, and I've asked, and she said, I'm sorry, but I just don't have. You know,
If I would be willing to volunteer to go down to get it on tape, so that we could get a historical, she did the first Lonsdale Homecoming booklet. And that gave a lot, but there's more.
Clarence McDonald was supposed to get that information, he never gave it to me.
I will get it.
Really, with regards to that, I was just so disappointed. Some years ago, an organization sponsored a history effort where Lonsdale people were supposed to write the history of their community. And I was at the Beck Center then, and I looked forward to that in great anticipation. When I got a copy of the book that was printed, it was full of Miss Sadie Jones, who could make the best pies in the community, or Miss Lucy Smith, who had a way with the children.
Was this the first homecoming booklet?
It was published by the people in Lonsdale. Nothing about the historic churches, nothing about Sandy Hill School, nothing about the John Taunton Institute, nothing about Noted Ghost, nothing about Graves, all about the people who were nice in the community. That was the history book that was published on Lonsdale. It was just so disappointing to me. And I'm waiting for this history, but it was a book about nice people. But whoever directed that is at fault, not the people who told their stories, because that's what they were going to do, tell their stories. But it had nothing to do with the story of Lonsdale. Okay?
Do you have a book of the first homecoming?
I don't have any of it. That's what Clarence McDowell was supposed to give me. So put the heat on him.
Well, I will give you, I have the first book,
Yeah.
and I will give you
All
that.
right, I'd love to see it. Okay, I'm sorry, yes.
And as a sidebar, for all of us that are United Methodists, Martin Chapel now has one of the few AA meetings in that section of town. Miss Johnny is a member of Martin Chapel, and as a Church Street member, we may need to, AA is supposed to be something that you're supposed to be able to walk in the door and have a cup of
let me wrap up and say, as I said, urban renewal completely destroyed the black business community. And only one black business that was operating during urban renewal in that area exists today. That's the Jardigan and Son Mortuary. So we lost all of that. By my count, 107 black businesses were destroyed. And many of them had been in business for decades. So that's what urban renewal did to us, and it's very sad. So unless there's some other comments and questions, that ends what I had to offer.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Somebody smarter than me said, knowledge is power. You've made us all smarter today. We've learned, I know, learned a lot. And we are appreciative of your information, your research, your intensity to keep the word spread. And we're just blessed to have you with us today.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. I know that not all of you are staying for lunch today, but I want to share with you a prayer that Jim Crook, who passed away on April 30th, sent to me and Jim, my husband. We had dinner with them one evening, and Jim prayed this prayer, and I said, oh, Jim, that is such a beautiful prayer. I would love to have a copy of that. And so I didn't think anything more about it. In a few days, I received this postcard from him, and he wrote the prayer on it. And boy, will I ever treasure this. So let us hear this prayer. He said, well, Judy, it's the Wesley Blessing. Be present at this table, Lord. Be here and everywhere adored. These mercies bless, and grant that we may feast in paradise with thee. Amen.